Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Could this stuff all be made up, really? Like, some kid is born, they report the memories of some adult who lived far away from them, and they had no way to know, and they have a birthmark in a similar shape to the one on that other person.
To the death wound, often.
Yeah. So someone has a birthmark similar to the death wound of some guy who lived halfway across India.
And I've done interviews on this. We know at the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies there, they have a database now of over 2,500 cases of typically young children, not under hypnosis or hypnotic regression, who spontaneously remember past lives. And in about half of those cases, they are able to go out and take the information provided by those children and validate it, that there's a high degree of matches.
So
with
you
what
look
the
at all
children
this
say.
evidence. Now it's not quantitative like precognition or ESP databases have become, but I mean, if you look at the totality of cases and really read them, I mean, the argument that all these kids and all these people are somehow making this up just doesn't make sense. And the idea that everyone writing about it and studying it is in on some giant conspiratorial fraud, that makes no more sense than the conspiracy theory that 100 Jewish bankers are running the world economy or something. I mean, whatever is going on there, it's not a fraud or a conspiracy, and it's not just people by chance making up things that agree so well with things they had no way of knowing about. Now, this doesn't mean that the traditional stories and explanations you find in Hinduism, Buddhism, various shamanic traditions, it doesn't mean these stories and explanations are correct in detail.
As a matter of fact, that some of the research contradicts certain notions.
Absolutely.
Like the notion of karma, that you'll be punished in one life for the bad deeds of a previous life. We have no evidence of that from these thousands of cases.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be true. People can have done terrible things in their past life and have a good life, have done wonderful things in their past life and have all kinds of trouble befall them. So, this is something that's very confusing when discussing these concepts with average people, because the reality of these phenomena, which is very complex and confusing, becomes tangled up with various religious, cultural, and moral systems. And disentangling these pieces is quite difficult, and I certainly haven't gone that far down that path. I want to recommend to everyone listening a book that you already know well, which is Immortal Remains by the philosopher Stephen Browdy. And that's
whom I've had the privilege of interviewing 10 times. And we have already scheduled dates to interview him specifically about Immortal Remains.
I mean, this book, it's fairly analytical philosophy oriented, so it's not technical, but it's also not leisure reading. But it goes through very carefully the possible explanations for these phenomena, and he's getting deep into the details. He takes for granted that these phenomena exist and are not just fraud or delusion. Then he looks at, well, how could we explain this stuff? I mean, is it really the case that a mind travels out of a dead guy's body and pops into some other kid's body? Is it really the case that after you die, your personality is somehow floating out there somewhere and can then talk to a medium or otherwise enter into our reality? Or are there other explanations for these data? For example, is that child or that medium just psychic in some way and reaching its mind back into the past to perceive something that happened in the past?
And he points out that we can't rule those explanations out.
That's right. But by far, the simplest explanation, he concludes, is that some form of survival of the individual mind and personality beyond the life of the physical body with which that mind was associated. Some form of survival seems the simplest explanation, and I think he is essentially correct, and I'd come to the same conclusion myself, though I didn't write it up as elegantly as he did.